Well, how's everyone doing? This is Bob Gums bringing you the Concern Forum. And today I have one of the most interesting people in this city as a guest. And I feel honored that this gentleman is here. And I'm also honored to call this man a friend. This is Bob Gangi, or if you want to be a little more classical about it, this is Robert Gangi. And this is the gentleman that, if you're a good cop, he's in your corner. But if you are a law enforcement person that abuses authority, then yes, he is that pain that you feel in the middle of the night when you're worrying about what your next day at work is going to be like. This is Robert Gangi. And we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about a few things law enforcement and other things. So,
I want to
Robert,
say, Bob, that I'm pleased to call you my friend, and I'm honored to be here.
well,
Honored
thank
that
you.
you invited me to engage in some palaver with you on key issues of the day.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I tell you, now that, and I knock on wood when I say this, that the COVID emergency, I'm not going to say that it's gone, but let's put it this way. Now that it appears to have simmered down somewhat, uh, and we're getting ready to go into spring, I tell you quite frankly, I think this is a great time to start talking about things such as law enforcement, especially after that incident, very strange incident, by the way, that we had in the subway. What was it, last week? About Mr. Smoke Bomb in the subway. I believe that was out in Brooklyn, if I'm not
It was
mistaken.
in Brooklyn at the subway stop at 36th and 4th Avenue in Brooklyn.
You have any insight on that, by the way? I'm curious.
I think the man is, I think the technical term is, no, I shouldn't engage that. The man is mentally troubled. Has a long history of mental health problems, as we've learned by reading the stories about him. And there was an interview with his sister where all that came to light. And he engaged in a very reckless, dangerous action.
Yeah.
And then it was also clear he had no intention to try to evade being captured. I mean, he just wandered around the city in broad daylight, to use a cliche. Actually, when the cops were not able to apprehend him, he called the police and waited for them to show up. And when they came in, I think it was McDonald's, I'm not sure. When they came in, he said, "I'm Frank, I'm the man you're looking for.
Oh,
I was
wow.
wondering I was wondering why it took you so long."
Oh, so he was complaining.
Yes.
I see. So he decides to throw smoke bombs in a crowded car and then start shooting. And then he's kind of upset because he wasn't arrested fast enough.
That seemed to be the case, yeah.
That is
Actually,
interesting.
it was a pointed question. I mean, if he was a customer,
Uh-huh.
he might have been able to evade the police, who seemed pretty non-compass men's in their inability to locate him, even after he had called in his location. I think 4 people had fingered him.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I'm kind of curious because apparently this chap seems to be, I mean, don't get me wrong, you do, not too many, thank God, but you do have black American and Hispanic American guys who are right wing,
Mm-hmm.
and this guy appears to be one of them.
It happens.
Yeah, and
Our mayor's kind of right wing.
yeah, I was gonna.
Certainly in his approach to law enforcement.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. What do you feel about Brother Adams?
Well, we're very critical of the policies and priorities
Mm.
that he is implementing as the new mayor.
Uh-huh.
He's definitely pro NYPD, despite whatever he claims about his past history with them. He was an NYPD officer and then a captain for 22 years.
Uh-huh.
And when it appears as if when a social problem comes to his attention,
Right.
his first, his go-to response is to call on the NYPD.
Mm.
So he has the NYPD in cruel and counterproductive fashion,
Uh-huh.
cleaning up the sites where unhoused people have been able to live in a relatively decent way in the city.
Uh-huh.
He's already added a large number of cops to patrol the subways. He's talking about now adding, I think he said another 3,500 more cops
Mm.
after this incident in the subway, as if that's the best response
Mm.
to securing safety on the subways or anywhere in New York City. So his priorities, to speak in general terms, is going to lead to more resources being available for the police and other law enforcement agencies, therefore less money available for the kind of approaches like more low-income housing, improved schools, improved mental health care and health care that would be more effective and more humane in producing a safer society and a more inclusive society.
See, this is what I tell you, um, I'm kind of, we'll put it this way, I'm very much deep in thought about this situation with law enforcement, and I tell you why. Because what the Republican Party, and again, not every single Republican, but the vast majority of the Republican Party, what they've done. Well, you know that they play race, okay, and the way they have it, and you hear this a lot in this country, and you hear it a lot now here in New York State. Democrats equal black and Hispanic equal soft on crime. And that really bothers me because I know of no person of color and I know of no working class white person or intellectual, um, like Upper West Side, Columbia University type white person. None of
Thinking
those
about
groups.
my community, Bob.
Yeah. Talk about you guys, right?
Right.
None of them are soft on crime. None of them want to be robbed or abused. None of them want to have a family member robbed or abused. And I think it's shameful the way the Republican Party uses a subject like crime that concerns all of us, right, to use it as a baseball bat to beat their political opponents over the head with. I don't, God knows, I don't like crime. I don't want to see crime. If I see a woman being assaulted, uh, I'm worried because I'm going to try and do something about it, and then I'll be worried about being arrested myself. So the whole crime situation is something for all of us, just not one particular party. And you know what? I am so sick of hearing this crap. You know,
Yeah, well, there's no question that the Republican Party become the know-nothing party.
Yeah.
They're not promoting any substantive policy proposals that that are grounded in reality and that would have any benign effect on our society. Their concentration is on attacking the Democrats and making the Democrats look soft on crime, making the Democrats look pro trans people, pro LGBTQ people as a negative. And for example, the way a number of Republican United States senators attacked Judge Richardson, who was nominated by President Biden to be a judge on the Supreme Court, was shameless and irresponsible and based on lies and gossip. But a lot of the Republican Party trades in that kind of tactic, that kind of strategy, and crime is another issue that they attempt to exploit. Our criticism of the NYPD is based on abusive and racist practices of the NYPD. There's all too much violence committed by the NYPD that does not get exposed and does not get. The police department and individual cops are not held accountable for the most part by the mainstream political structure that operates in our city, and this is true of cities. And there are very few mainstream politicians who are willing to be, in any serious way, critical of policing. Police have too much power. They're essentially unaccountable. And there's the old proverbial saying we learned in high school, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
And the police in New York City have virtual absolute power. So inevitably, corruption will set in, and inevitably there'll be abuse of their power. In New York City, it takes the form of, often takes the form of blatant racist practices. But because the department is so powerful, because it's almost sacrosanct in the eyes of many, many people, essentially there's no break on it. And Adams is, by all indications, he's a cheerleader for the NYPD. Some of the abusive practices they've engaged in the past, there's a real chance it's just going to get worse because we have the City Hall, the occupant of City Hall in New York City is demonstrated no willingness to draw a line when it comes to police misconduct.
Okay, let me ask you this. Crime, okay? Crime in the subway, crime in the streets. You're the mayor. What would you do?
Well, it's interesting you posit the possibility that could be the mayor. I ran for mayor in 2017.
That's right, you did.
Didn't quite. There was not a groundswell of support for me, so it was not a successful campaign in that regard. What I would do is, if I was mayor, is I would significantly reduce the responsibilities and the resources that we right now delegate to the NYPD. So, for example, school safety should be the responsibility of educators, not the police department. Right now, the city has over 5,000 personnel in the schools that are on the NYPD payroll.
Okay.
Dealing with unhoused people should not be the responsibility of NYPD. It should be the responsibility of social workers and other agencies that have the main purpose of providing needed services to unhoused people and to do what can be done to find decent housing for unhoused people. Our school system could be significantly improved by reducing the size of classes, which would mean a significant addition of resources for the Division of Education. Research shows over and over and over again that the main educational policy that would improve outcomes, academic outcomes, are smaller class sizes. My wife Barbara and I experienced this but we had two sons, much older now, but we put them in public schools. The two public schools we put them in began to be less congenial, didn't provide for the kind of education we wanted for our sons. So despite the expense, we took our boys out, put them in private schools, and on Parents' Day, we visited the private schools. Our son, Jess, for example, he was in a class with maybe 12 or 14 other kids. In public schools, he was in classes with 30 and 32 kids. Of course, small class sizes is going to provide for a better educational experience for children. And we have the resources to provide that for public school students, but we're not spending the money. In part, we're not spending the money because the NYPD, when you include some hidden expenses, costs the city over $10 billion a year, and we're not getting the kind of payoff from that investment. Is one way to think about it. And there's just no question that the kind of policing that the NYPD engages in, it's called broken windows policing, where cops mainly target low-level offenses. It's blatantly racist. We at PROP, Police Reform Organizing Project, is my organization. And it's dedicated to ending abusive and racist police practices in New York City. One of our projects is to sit in on the arraignment parts in our criminal courts. And the arraignment parts are where people who've just been arrested are brought before a judge to be either officially charged with a crime or to be released or to have another court date set or have bail set, and they end up on Rikers Island. So we were in there this morning. In fact, I came to your studio, Bob, from doing court monitoring in Manhattan. Saw 15 cases, 14 involving African American or Latino New Yorkers, 14 out of 15. And those are the kind of numbers we see whenever we do court monitoring. 85 to 95% of the people arrested by NYPD cops are people of color in New York City. And it's a blatantly racist practice, and it does more harm than good, because many of the people that we saw this morning and the kind of people we see every time we do the court monitoring, they're charged with very low-level infractions: disorderly conduct, petty larceny, possession of, not even possession of drugs, but the devices people might use in order to be able to smoke crack, for example.
Pipes.
Right. Very, very low-level charges. The court almost always releases them. I mean, one case today, the judge set bail, and the person's going to end up on Rikers Island. But 14 out of 15 cases, the people walk out of court. They're held for, at most, roughly a day until they're arraigned. There's no public safety advantage, but you have targeted people, and you have put them through a difficult experience, and you've communicated to them that we, the police department, the agent of society that most deals with people in poor communities, are treating you in essentially a hostile way, and the opposite of a benign way. I didn't want to use the word malicious for some reason. And what we need is to eliminate entirely that kind of law enforcement, because it's, again, abusive and racist and counterproductive, and invest resources on providing stability for people that now live in low-income communities of color, better educational experiences, better health care, better mental health care. That man, the subway bomber, he didn't get mental health care. It didn't seem like any time in the course of his life. 62 years old now, I think.
Wow.
Still younger than you and me. And inevitably, some mentally ill people are going to engage in destructive and violent acts. And if we provided better mental health services, that it would be sort of had a better approach to producing a safe and secure society and an inclusive society than adding another 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 cops on the subway, which is the direction that Eric Adams seems to be going.
Yeah, it looks that way. Well, what happens to your average working class New Yorker, average working class white guy, could be black, just working class.
Right.
And they're saying, well, nice listening to your statistics, but I just want to be safe when I have to take the subway.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's what the right wing would hit you with.
Right, and
they would Fox News you, as I call it.
Exactly. No, I understand that, and they probably feel safe if they get on a subway and they see a police officer. But we've learned, like for example, there were cops at that police station where the subway bomber was, and he walked away without being stopped. And as you and I were discussing earlier, he had to call the NYPD himself to come get him, and he waited. Again, I think it was a McDonald's. He waited for them to come, and it was reported in the New York Post, which is not a hostile newspaper to the NYPD.
What the hell they are,
yeah. Anyway, this was reported in the Post that when they came in, he said, "I'm Frank. I'm the guy you're looking for." And then he said, "What took you so long?"
What took you so long? Well, he was convenient.
Yeah.
Put it that way. It was nice of him.
Again, as we were talking earlier, my reading, and I think it's the obvious reading, he had no intention of evading law enforcement.
Yeah.
He was wandering around the city.
Yeah. Excuse me 1 second.
Sure.
Listen. Fortunately, with that incident with the Mr. Smoke Bomber, no one was killed. And we're both very, very happy about that there was no loss of life. And it's not that we take it lightly or anything like that. I just wanted to put that in.
No, it's terrifying.
Yeah, because...
Absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, if you're the one on the wrong end of a smoke device, it can be pretty scary, as I learned when I was in the service. It can be rough. But the point that we're trying, I believe Brother Gangi is trying to make, is that there are other ways to do good, safe, fair law enforcement. We don't have to turn the NYPD into stormtroopers, as it were. That's how a lot of right wingers come off, with that Fox News mentality, like, yeah, just shoot him, hang him, the death penalty. And I don't think that's the answer.
One of the challenges for people like me and my colleagues that work on criminal justice issues, policing issues, in promoting smart and effective reforms, is that there is probably no other policy arena in our country and in our city and state where there is as much misinformation and where the policy has virtually little to do with what research tells us works. For example, there is the NYPD practices broken windows policing. There has, and I know this because I know the field, there's never been a study that proves that broken windows policing is an effective crime-fighting strategy. In fact, the Department of Investigation of New York City produced a study several years ago which concluded that broken windows policing was not effective in advancing public safety. It was not an effective crime-fighting strategy, and that it was marked by a stock racial bias, as I've indicated. Again, 85 to 95% of the people arrested due to the broken windows approach to law enforcement are New Yorkers of color.
Tell me something. not changing the subject, but maybe it might help in terms of perception. What if you watch them? What do you Blue Bloods, NYPD,
Oh, these
Special
TV
Victims?
shows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one do you find most informative or most entertaining?
Well, none of them.
Okay.
The one of the I think just realities in our society is that we romanticize police officers and policing, and there are, as you were just hinting, really suggesting, there are many cop shows on television. And if the NYPD did what the cops do in those TV cop shows, we'd be okay with that. You don't see on any of these cop shows the cops arrested. I'll give you an example of a case we saw when we monitored the courts in Manhattan. There was an elderly woman,
Right.
stood before the judge, a cane supporting her,
Okay.
and the judge released her. And we followed her out of the courtroom, and again, she needed a cane to support herself, black woman, and we asked her what her crime was, and she said she stole a package of ham and eggs from the Harlem Pathmark. And we said, well, why did you take the package of ham and eggs? And she said, because I was hungry. So I'm just using this as what we think is a dramatic example.
Yeah.
The policy response to that woman should be, we're going to provide you with food.
Yeah.
The policy response should not be to arrest a disabled elderly woman because they stole food due to hunger. And it's a completely inappropriate response, but it symbolizes what's wrong with the way we deal with petty crime in New York City. That kind of approach is not only is it racist, because that kind of arrest almost only takes place in poor neighborhoods of color in the city, but it's counterproductive. These truths are. Is my phone going?
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
We think these truths are how to put it, well, are fundamental, but also very, very reasonable. And the researcher showed, as I indicated, that the kind of policing that involves the cops arresting that woman, which in no way, I can't imagine anybody advancing that the arresting her and people like her advances public safety, only does more harm. But those truths go up against the very, how to put it, in the very deeply invested belief many Americans have in the bravery and the value of policing. And the TV shows that you referenced promote that. But what you see in those TV shows are, you don't see, at least the ones I'm aware of, you don't see cops on the beat. And by far, 80 to 90% of police officers are cops on the beat. If they focus on detectives who are of good conscience and solve crimes and bring to justice people who have committed violence. And that's a legitimate function of a police department.
Right.
But that's only a very, very small percentage of what the NYPD does.
See, that's another thing that I find very disturbing. Now, you remember this past summer, I wish whoever started it used another term, but somebody somewhere came up with the phrase,
defund police, right?
there you go,
Yeah.
right?
I agree with you. It's a very
unfortunate
use
slogan. Of words.
Yeah. The Black Lives Matter is a very effective slogan, and captures in very few words, as good slogans do, a very important message. Defund the police is overly simplistic, and it is and has obviously frightened a lot of people, and frightened them, at least some of the people, to the extent that they'll run into the Fox News Republican right corner. Now we support significantly reducing the resources for police in New York City. Significantly. It's, as I mentioned, the city, when you count all the hidden expenses, spends over $10 billion a year on the NYPD. And we think a lot of that money would be better spent on some of the things I mentioned before: more mental health care, smaller school sizes, would improve the quality of life for communities all over the city and make our city safer and more inclusive. Give you an example on the mental health issue. As you and I were talking, I ran for mayor in the primary against Bill de Blasio in 2017. And I was petitioning during our campaign, and I met a black woman, actually a correction officer. She had 2 young kids. This was in the Union Square area, who were rambunctious but adorable, and she was trying to keep her eye on them. And she told me a very painful personal story. She also had a son in his early 20s who had serious mental health issues, and she could not get proper care for him. And a nurse told her that the way to make some effort to get some care for him is you got to call 911 on him. So cops come, and they might take him to a hospital where he gets put into a clinic. That should not be the resource that someone who's concerned about the mental health troubles of her child has to use. And in fact, we know of too many cases where cops show up when they're called to deal with a person in psychiatric crisis and end up doing harm to that person. Even in some cases, in recent years, the steps cops have taken have led to a person's death.
So naturally, cops, when they're in training, you agree then that they should have some type of psychological?
No, our position and the position of a lot of organizations in the city, including organizations whose job is to either advocate for mental health policies or provide mental health services. Our position is to remove the police entirely from responding to 911 calls involving New Yorkers in psychiatric crisis. Instead of sending cops, send mental health professionals, send peer counselors, send medical staff, professional staff, mental health staff, rather than police officers. Why should we expect a police officer with a badge and a gun and a baton be able to deal intelligently and effectively with people in psychiatric crisis? And there are a lot of police officers, and we're sure of this, who would welcome not having the responsibility of responding to calls on behalf of people in psychiatric crisis. It's also our view is, why do we have police officers dealing with traffic violations? Or when there's an accident on the highway, we're sending people, again, with cops, with guns and badges. We should send mechanics. We should send professionals who know how to deal with what the problems might be if a car breaks down. And in terms of traffic enforcement, again, why do we need police officers to do that? And as you know, Bob, a lot of the cases where that unfortunately end up with the cop shooting and killing a person often perversely a person of color, starts with a traffic stop. There's
Yeah.
a case recently in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah.
Started with a traffic stop. And we saw the video. The cop ends up laying on top of the guy and shooting him in the head. Black guy, too. So we think there are a lot of areas where the cops are now, in places like New York City, the primary government go-to response, where that responsibility should be put in the hands of other government agencies or community-based organizations that are better equipped to deal with the problem. Unhoused people, people with mental health problems, traffic situations, just a couple of the areas where we should remove police responsibility. And those are steps that are involved, in effect, defunding police, reducing the resources for police, and then orienting those resources to other better, safer responses.
Now, let me ask you something else. And it's not off the subject.
Thank heavens. We don't want to wander off the subject.
Although some folks might think so.
Yeah, how about so? Okay.
Why do you think? I mean, both you and I, we've been around. Why is it, does it seem, well, actually it's not seeming, it's true. Why do we have the most mental problems? Maybe I'm using an incorrect term.
Yeah.
But, why is it that in this country, and it just doesn't happen to black and brown people, it happens to white Americans almost as bad.
Well,
What
mental
is
health
this mental
issues,
thing? People
don't
just snap
discriminate.
out, Oh, I'm going to work this morning and I think I'm going to kill about 8 of my coworkers.
Yeah.
Why do we have that?
Yeah. Well, one is access to guns, and that's been documented. Other countries, there are many fewer guns in the society, so that makes it less likely that people are going to use guns to kill other people. But the question you're asking, why is mental health problems more widespread in the United States than in other countries?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true. You're suggesting that that's true, and I don't have an answer for that. You and I, of course, are very sane and thoughtful, and
Yeah, most times.
most times, exactly. Yeah, right. There are exceptions. So again, I'll repeat what I just said. I don't know if that's true, that there are more people in need of psychiatric help in the United States than in other countries. And if it is true, I can't explain it.
Well, we have a population. Our population now is about close to 340 million people in this country.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah, but we have over 400 million guns. Now, this also falls into the purview of you and your organization, because guns are a real closely wound up
Sure.
with the whole criminal justice
Sure.
thing. So what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it, in your estimation?
Well, we need serious laws that restrict the availability of guns. And getting back to, again, a point we were discussing earlier, the Republican Party has resisted virtually any and the most modest common sense proposals to restrict the availability of guns. So it's been very difficult for states and for our United States government to set up effective gun control programs. And even in New York State, where there are, I think, substantive gun control laws, that doesn't prevent guns coming into the state from out of state.
So does that mean that you and I were not really red-blooded Americans because we want to take away the Second Amendment rights of those folks that live out on the island and those folks that live once you get up around Monticello, the Catskills. And
That's right. It means that we are not red-blooded Americans.
Jeez.
No, I'm kidding.
We're anemic.
It's fair to say we don't want to take away guns from everybody. Maybe part of me does. No guns anywhere in our society, but we're ready to accept that there are some people who love their guns, some people who collect guns, some people who are hunters, and they have a right to that.
Yeah.
The problem is that there's such a widespread availability of guns that people who want to use guns for either criminal purposes or to do violence to people in their lives or people generally can get a hold of those guns. And a lot of those people, if not my wife is a PhD psychologist.
Oh. Okay.
And this was a number of years ago. There was a terrible shooting. And I forget what incident it was. As you know, we've had far too many.
Yeah.
And the talking heads on television, we were watching them, and one of them says, what motivates a person to do this kind of terrible thing, kill multiple people? And Barbara screamed at the TV set, because they're crazy. And I'm convinced that every person who engages in that kind of mass murder has serious mental health problems. And conceivably, if we had better, more available mental health services in every community in our country, that would be an effective way to intervene on the course that the lives of the people who commit these acts are taking. Again, the man who blew up the subway last week, clearly a history of mental health problems, clearly not sufficiently dealt with, and that most people with mental health problems do not commit violence. But some do, and there was no effective step that anyone took or provided in the course of this man's life that could intervene on the path that he was on, that eventually led to him committing this terrible act.
I'll tell you, that what else concerns me along this topic. See, what you and your group are attempting to do, it plays off in several different directions. Because, for example, and I'm not trying to play Chicken Little, folks, but we have to be real. It was just last January 6th, you had a bunch of people who descended upon the nation's capital and tried to overthrow the government. I'm wondering now, is this going to be a key feature with our elections from now on? In a situation like here in New York, I'm wondering what would Mayor Adams' stance, where would he stand? For example, in Philadelphia, I think it was members of the Ku Klux Klan, the Poor Boys. They tried to conduct a takeover of Philadelphia. That's just right down the road.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about this.
Yeah.
I am aware of the January 6th.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the whole world knows about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, right in Philly. Now, the cool thing was that the people of Philadelphia, of all colors and nationalities, they rallied and they basically said, get the hell out of here. But I am concerned about here in New York. You see, I know you realize a lot of things, but in my studies, I mean, it has made me so concerned. You have all kinds of money lined up against folks like yourself, all right, who saying, yeah, well, we need law enforcement, but we need a different kind of law enforcement. And you have so many different groups who are organized against you. And this organization comes from some very wealthy people. And, something that in the back of my mind, I'm trying to figure out just, what are they in this for? What is it that they're trying to do? Why is it that they're trying to make us so afraid of each other? Bob Gangi says we need a different type of law enforcement, and then they'll turn around and attack Bob Gangi for being anti-cop. It's not about being anti-cop. It's about trying to have some kind of sane quality of life. And why would anybody be against that? See, that's what really bothers me. Why would anyone oppose what you're trying to do?
I think that at least in some cases, there's just an honest difference of opinion.
Right.
And I think in other cases, and there's probably overlap here, people are mainly focused on advancing what they consider to be their interests. And they're promoting policies and practices that protect those interests. I'm talking, at this point, I'm talking pretty much about the wealthy class in the United States, probably wealthy people all over the world. And there are exceptions, but a lot of people with wealth and with power, including politicians, including captains of industry, including people who occupy and play important roles in our society, they, again, with exceptions, will tend to be conservative, will tend to feel it's their responsibility to protect the status quo and to protect what they consider to be, the better, more civilized way of life in places like the United States. Okay. And I think for a lot of the MAGA types who are, diehard supporters of Donald Trump, a lot of those people seem to be working class people or low income people or middle class people, not part of the wealthy class. Part of it is a puzzle to me, because I see Donald Trump and I hear him speak for a minute or two, and I immediately recoil. But in ways I don't understand, he obviously has enormous appeal to a lot of people. I don't think it's the majority of the country, but
no, it's not.
But it's a lot of people, and I don't understand that. But at the same time, I think it's important for activists and advocates like myself to get beyond that. We don't understand it, but we know it's a reality, and then we have to figure out political strategies for dealing with it and for making sure that constituency, Trump and his people, right now it seems practically the entire Republican Party, that they don't get too much power in our country, and it's a tough situation. As you know, Bob, a lot of people are predicting that in the election coming up in November for Congress and for some seats in the Senate is going to go the Republicans' way, and I do find it hard to understand, given I don't see what the appeal of the Republican Party is now, because it really is a kind of know-nothing party.
I'm hoping that they're wrong about that.
Me too.
Or at least we break even.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Because this is very dangerous. Now, what about registration? I didn't ask you about that, but how do you feel about that, gun registration?
Oh, I guess I don't feel I have enough knowledge or expertise to have a strong opinion. Anything, in my view, I'll have a more general answer, that restricts the access of guns to virtually everybody. and in such a way that guns only wind up in the hands of stable people, responsible people, however you want to characterize them. I would support that kind of policy. But to get to the topic that we've been discussing, either directly or obliquely, is the Republican Party. The Republican Party, how to put this? History is working against the Republican Party. Most young people, speaking in general terms, do not support the Republican Party. They're not necessarily Democrats, but more likely to be Democrats or independents who don't buy into the Republican ideology. Most black people, Latino people, Asian people don't support the Republican Party, and more likely to support the Democratic Party. So time is on the side of a more oppressive approach to government in the United States. And having said that, at the same time, the Republicans are exercising more power and control than certainly I would like and that I would expect. Like, for example, the way they treated Judge Jackson, the woman that in another time, I would have guessed, well, that you were destroying yourself politically. You're behaving that way in such a reprehensible and shameless way, in the way you're going after the Judge Jackson, who was obviously a smart, thoughtful, decent person, and the way you're attacking her and belittling her, that's going to work against you politically. But we know that the Republican senators who did that to her, they thought they did it mainly because they thought it was going to work for them politically. And that's, I can't figure that. How it appears to me, and obviously lots and lots of other people, in no uncertain terms, to be reprehensible behavior, abhorrent behavior, hateful behavior, plays well politically with some constituencies. It's hard to figure. So I think there is reason to worry about, the political state of our country and what might happen in future elections.
Yeah, and where does law enforcement fit into this?
Yeah.
Because the thing that I find so amazing, we talk about January 6th, you had you had retired and a couple of active duty. I don't think you had any active duty out of New York City cops. I mean, who were tearing down the Capitol. Yeah. You had some retirees.
Right.
Okay. And
well, also they attacked cops.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, right. I think didn't one cop die from?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So so you would think that the law enforcement oriented Republican Party would be repulsed by that.
Exactly.
It doesn't play out that way.
Yeah.
So go figure.
I don't know. I felt, that really blew my head because, number one, I used to work in that building for a time, and to see it being torn apart like that, it really, I didn't think. If you had asked me a month before, if you had asked me in December, do I have any sentimental feelings towards the White House or the Pentagon or Congress, the Capitol building? Yeah. I would have said probably no.
Yeah.
But when I actually saw those people doing what they were doing, it hurt me.
Yeah, well, it was very destructive, and it was a form of madness.
Yeah, but see, those are the same people they'll say, well, that guy Bob Gangi, he's a nut, he's a radical rabble rouser.
Yeah. See,
and I'm saying, well, yeah, but you're the one beating police upside the head with the American flag, killing one of them.
You're right.
A bunch of them committed suicide in the days after that.
Yeah.
And I can see why. I can see why a cop who was pledged to defend the Capitol of the United States would, after a few days, commit suicide or feel like committing suicide because he's being beat upon by supposedly his kind of people.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but see, that's why I worry about here in New York, because we're going to need a mayor that's open-minded and that has a grasp of the politics behind all of this. And that's what really worries me, because is your friend still there?
I think it's right to worry. We at Prop are doing what we can to advance policies that we consider to be grounded in a sense of compassion for your fellow New Yorkers that would advance justice.
Tell the folks about Prop and when you started it, why, and what they can do to help you folks.
Right. Well, PROP stands for Police Reform Organizing Project. It's a organization that's dedicated to exposing and ending abusive and racist policing and advancing an agenda and a vision that would lead to our city being more just, safer, and more inclusive. And the big focus in terms of specific policies, the kind of things that you and I spoke during the course of the show, which is where we propose and we advocate for steps that would reduce the responsibility of and resources for the NYPD. So, for example, removing the NYPD from being first responders to calls involving people in psychiatric crisis, removing the NYPD from the schools and returning school safety, the responsibility for it to educators, which is the way it was before Rudy Giuliani became mayor. Removing the police from having anything to do with dealing with homeless people and unhoused people, and have those interactions and those services provided by social workers and other professionals, and have resources going into low-income housing. So those are the things. We're not a service organization. We don't respond to people who have individual needs or problems. We're an organizing. We're research, policy advocacy, and organizing organizations. And one of the projects I mentioned earlier, in which I and another prop person was doing early today, was to monitor the arraignments in the 5 New York City criminal courts, where we're able to, in effect, observe who the cops are arresting, because everybody who gets arrested gets arraigned. So if you go into the arraignment parts of the 5 criminal courts in New York City on a regular basis, which we do, you get a very good idea of police arrest practices. And what we've seen, and we've been doing this work since 2014, seen nearly 7,000 cases. What we've seen is 85 to 95% of the people cops arrest are New Yorkers of color, and the vast, vast majority of arrests are for low-level offenses. I mean, there are exceptions where people who are accused of serious violent crimes are brought before the judge, but they are the exceptions. And then we publicize that information. We put out reports trying to educate the public and politicians about what the NYPD really does on a day-to-day basis and how harmful it is and how deeply racist it is to and how therefore it does such harm to so many people in our city.
Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. We have a lot of work to do. And the main thing that I can say from my end is that folks in my situation who have a chance to get, to take up a microphone, is to tell you folks out there, be aware of what's going on, pay attention. I will be given, I'm not quite sure how we're going to go about this, but my phone number will be up on the screen there over the next few days. Just if you need to get in contact with Prop, if you think that there's something that they need to take a look at, just give me a call and I'll make sure that Mr. Gangi will be able to, contact you and maybe
Definitely.
help your case out. To see what's going on.
Well, so we look for volunteers to engage in the work with us, like the person who's with me today when we were court monitor in Manhattan was a volunteer. We have a core of interns and volunteers, and we're also looking for financial contributions to support the work.
Well, there you go.
Nonprofit, by the way, tax
It's a
exempt nonprofit.
There you go. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I want to thank you for letting the Concerned Forum come into your home. And by the way, we also can be seen on YouTube. And do me a favor, when you see that little box, check, see if you like it. If you don't like the show, you find it informative, what have you. But we are out here for you. So this is Bob Gums, and today I have my good friend Bob Gangi here. And I'll be back, same time, same channel, next week. Take care.
Sign
Take
it
care
off.
of each other. Bye now.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.